Hello and welcome. There's many people we speak to that blame their life circumstances and use it primarily as an excuse to continue drinking. Today I'm going to interview somebody who's had a traumatic life, to say the least, and to show you no matter what your life circumstances are, you can give up drink and you can live a happy and productive life. And on that note, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Steve. Welcome, Steve.
Okay.
Right, so let's go back, Steve, and can you tell us a little bit about your life, right from the start, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I was I was fostered by an elderly brother and sister. Found out later in life that I was brought out of the Salvation Army hostel,
Yeah.
and brought to the home where I live, and I was fostered.
So you didn't know your biological mother from
No.
birth?
No, not at that time.
No.
Not at that time.
Okay.
And I have a very good memory from when I was 5, started school. I always felt different at school with the other kids. They had we're from big families with brothers and sisters, and I used to call them proper parents.
Right, okay.
And I was very jealous and insecure about that.
So you were very jealous and insecure of people having the natural parents, the biological parents, right? And
I had to, you know, I didn't feel part of, so it was very competitive
right,
to try and fit in
right.
sports and
You think, we spoke about this before, that competitiveness was a way of bolstering your own sense of self because you felt insecure?
yeah. Yeah. And then when I was 8, my biological mother came with the welfare. It was the welfare in them days. It wasn't social service, it was the welfare. A lady, welfare lady. And she wanted to take me.
So you'd not seen your biological mother since birth, you didn't
No,
know your biological mother.
no.
You'd set up home with foster parents who, to you at that point, were your natural parents, yeah, your mother and father, and that must have been very, very difficult.
Well, I was introduced. There was my foster parents, myself, and my biological mother, and the welfare lady, and the welfare lady introduced me to, this is your biological mother.
Right.
And you now need to go and live with her.
Yeah.
So I run away. I just run from the house, and I took myself, there's a railway runs the back of my house, and it was always a safe sanctuary for me growing up, young age, and I run away and hid.
Right.
And it seemed like hours and hours, and eventually I went back, and they'd gone, to my delight. And then in the preceding days and weeks to come, there was an arrangement that I would have to go and visit her, and she would have to come and visit me. And I would go down to, she lived in Gambia Terrace, part of Liverpool town, and she lived in Grove Street, a part of Liverpool town. And I had to, this is at 9, 10 years of age, after school, go and visit her, get a bus down, and I hated it. I was...
What used to go through your mind at that point?
That she would keep me.
Right, okay.
She wouldn't let me come back.
So to take it away from who now you perceive to be your real parents,
Yeah.
your foster parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They weren't happy with it, but it had to be done under the
And the law.
conditions, under law,
Yeah.
under the conditions of law, yeah. And there'd be different men there, and they'd say stuff, and it was awful.
Yeah.
Lived in fear.
Yeah.
And then she would send letters saying, "I will, if I meet you under the statue of Lewis's, the well-known statue, I'll buy you a bike, I'll buy you a watch." Because that was another thing I was jealous of, because all the other kids, they all had proper presents, if you like.
Yeah. Right.
Birthdays, Christmases, and
Yeah.
although my foster parents done the best, they didn't have the money, they were pensioners,
Yeah.
and they just couldn't give me anything,
Yeah.
you know. It was all simple things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she promised me this in a letter. I would go down, I'd stand there in town, frightened, because there were loads of people in town, and she just wouldn't turn up.
Right. That must have been really emphasising and compounding the sense of rejection you'd felt from when you were able to feel a sense of rejection
Yeah.
early in life.
Felt so low, and I'd walk home. I would walk home from town, which was a good distance, 5 miles, say, 6 miles, whatever. And this went on and on and on. And at 15, I broke all ties with her,
Right. Okay.
because that was of a legal age.
Right. Okay.
She wrote me a letter, and she said, "You are now 15, you'll be able to leave school and go to work, and it's your duty to look after me now."
Oh. So I imagine that would have brought up a lot of anger.
And a lot of anger I brought up, and that was it. But growing up, I sexually abused as a child
Right.
from the age of 6
So you sexually abused.
by my foster father.
Right.
From 6 till 12, 6 years.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was normal.
Yeah.
And what he would do, I'd be sitting downstairs on the couch by the window, and he'd sit in front of the fire. We didn't have a television in them days, we had a radio, wireless. And he would beckon and wave me over to him.
Right.
And I'd have to get down on my hands and knees, perform what I thought was normal,
Yeah.
and then he would dismiss me.
That must have been awful. Can you explain? Can you still think what
I
was
thought
going
it was normal.
Right, as many people do in that
And-
situation.
I knew my foster mother was in the back kitchen,
Right.
but I just thought it was normal. It's only in later life when I've revisited it and spoke about it
Yeah.
that I've realised it wasn't normal. Certainly wasn't normal. And I used to think, why is she not doing anything about it?
Yeah. And what age would you be when you sort of realised this was abnormal?
12,
Right. Okay.
and I stopped it.
Yeah.
I just stopped it. He beckoned me over for the last time, and I just sat where I was, and never ever went near him again.
Right.
I never spoke to him. And he died when I was 14. He died in the home. He died a horrible death. He had cancer right through him. He was in his late 70s. I never went to his funeral. And I grew up hating the man.
Right. So if we can retract, so you know, from birth basically, your biological mother, for reasons unknown to the moment, but she decided to hand you over to foster care.
Salvation Army.
To Salvation Army, yeah, and you eventually went. So there's obviously, as you're growing up, which we've spoke about before, you know, a great sense of rejection. And also, you've said how different you felt at school, Steve. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I just felt out of place. I felt different. I was small, skinny, a massive curly hair. Women would always run their hands through my hair, isn't he? That lovely hair, and you'd eat a lot of crusts, and I just felt so alone. And as I said before, I had to be very competitive. I thought I had to be very competitive to fit in.
Yeah.
And I did.
And you've also said in the past about, as we were saying earlier on, money was short, and I know you've told me before you have to wear hand-me-down clothes and stuff like that.
I was what's known as a latchkey kid as well, you know. And I'd never key to get in, and I'd have to sit on the step.
Right.
At the front when my parents used to go shopping. They'd have a big pram and they'd go over shopping, and there'd be hours, and I'd come home from school and there'd be nobody there, and I'd sit on the, people going past me, oh look at Steve, you know, sitting on the step.
Yeah.
So then I'd go and jump over the back door and sit on the grass in the back garden.
So there was an awful lot of trauma and rejection in childhood. So if we can just leave that there, obviously I think you've painted a real picture of how difficult life was for you as a child, which I think, you know, makes you a great example in what you've achieved today, which we'll come to later on. So when did drink come into the equation?
Well, I tasted drink at a very early age, around 9, 10, in the home.
Right.
Because my foster parents, they used to get a fortnightly delivery of off the co-op of a crate of Guinness and a bottle of 5-star brandy.
Right.
And they would sit around the fire, and they would pour the Guinness into a glass, and they'd put the hot poker in the fire, and they put it in the Guinness. It would thing you up and fizz up, and they'd have a drop of brandy. And I would sit there amazed, looking at this, you know. And at the end of the, they didn't drink all the bottles. They just, it would be one a night. And I would take the empty glasses out, but I would drink the dregs.
Right.
Because they never, and I could never work that out, why they'd leave some. Even at that early age, why are they leaving a little bit at the bottom of the glass? But I was made up because I'd drink it.
Right. And can you remember how you felt when you first did it?
Oh,
yeah.
From being in that room and being so out of it,
Yeah.
feeling disparted, not a part of the room
Yeah.
and the people in it. Although the sexual abuse was going on, which I accepted was normal,
Yeah.
I'd go in the back kitchen, and from them few minutes when I'd drink the dregs, it was like a warm glow.
So there was a seductive trap set really early on in your case. Yeah. So how did that escalate?
Well, I escalated on the streets, because when I was knocking around with other lads, we getting to the age of 12, 13, we would get cheap wine out of the off licenses.
Right.
We'd get somebody to go in and get it who looked older, or get somebody who could buy it. Cheap plunk and cider.
Yeah.
I was a big lover of cider.
Yeah.
Big jars out of the big bottles out of the grocers. Used to sell it in the grocers.
Right.
Green grocers. And I always, looking back, I always drank more than anybody else.
Yeah.
So I was made up if they were sick, or they didn't want any more, and I'd finish it. And it just made me feel okay.
I think this is a really pertinent point when we come to the alcoholic to alchemist philosophy, which was primarily based on a lot of stuff we've been through as friends as well, the different techniques, as well as hundreds of other people using these techniques. But one of the things we use the term alchemist to mean transformation of the mind, not transforming base metals into gold. We use it for transforming our emotional and mental debris into our psychological wealth. But one of the things, and we've said this time and time again, but I think it's worth emphasising, is that alcohol affects the frontal lobes of our brain. It filters through what they call the blood-brain barrier, which nothing really except water is supposed to get through. Mm-hmm. But because the constituencies of alcohol is like water, it compromises this blood-brain barrier, and it gets through to our brain, and particularly our frontal lobes of our brain. Well, our frontal lobes of our brain marshal our inhibitions, and when alcohol hits it, we become uninhibited. Now, another word for, or another phrase for uninhibited means we don't care. So you've got all of this emotional baggage going on, which obviously is going to impact on the way you operate in the world. It's going to give you, which we know, exceptionally low self-esteem. It's going to make you feel different. But then when you take alcohol and it reaches the frontal lobes of your brain, all of a sudden you don't care about these things, because that's what alcohol does. That's the seductive trap that alcohol sets. So that makes absolute sense. Mm-hmm. So you got these signs and you felt much better. You felt you didn't care. You felt much better. What happened then?
Well, then as I was growing up, and I was growing up with the lads and playing football in the road and the park, and somebody would come over me, and I wasn't drinking every day or large quantities at that time. But I'd feel different, I'd be winning, could be winning 4 or 5, nothing, which was made me feel good because I was very competitive. Always on with the underdog,
Yeah.
Always with the underdog, and
so that was, in a way, that was a metaphor for your life.
Made sure
always supporting the underdog. Yeah. In other words, I am metaphorically supporting yourself in many ways.
Yeah. And I would take myself off back onto the railway, and I would dream my dreams, My dreams were they were just, why haven't I had a proper mother and father, why haven't I got brothers and sisters?
Okay. This is important though, isn't it, Steve? They are really pertinent things that lots of people take for granted. And for you to be asking yourself them questions at a young age really reflects the devastation your early part of life is. Even though there was love there, obviously, as well, with your foster parents, quite often there can be, in situations like you were in, hatred and love fused together. Mm-hmm. And lots of people in your circumstances are very afraid to express that they love the perpetrator of the abuse as well, because they think people will think I'm weird if I say I love them. But yet they have love and hate fused together, and it's very difficult to try and overcome that. And the way it's done quite often in a counselling setting is that we have to remove the actions, the negative actions of the person, the unacceptable, i.e. the abuse actions of the person, from the person as a whole. And then we do, like we've done with you, we do find that there is reasons why a person like yourself would love the perpetrator as well as hate them. But nevertheless, we're realising you're sitting on this embankment, or you're sitting, on the railway, and you're reflecting, and you're asking for what most people would take for granted in life. This is a normal mum and dad, and so it's reflecting. So carry on, Steve.
Well, my foster father was a man of very few words. My foster mother was the strong person in the household.
Right.
He was very artistically painter, and he was a very good pianist.
Yeah.
We had the big piano. I'll go into that later what I've done with that.
Yeah.
And he never ever spoke, I never had a conversation with him. Me and my foster mother, we had a very, very good sense of humour. We had a laugh, if you like. She was like the granny out at the Clampets.
Right.
The granny, if
Yeah.
you can remember the granny out at the Clampets.
Yeah.
When we did eventually get a television, we used to watch the Beverly Hillbillies, and she referred to it as Irene Randall, her name was.
Yeah.
Very like her, you know, give you an idea.
Yeah.
So we used to have a laugh, but my foster father had died, and I say I felt no remorse. Didn't go to his funeral. Hated the man with a passion.
Mm-hmm.
And grew up just me and my foster mother together.
Right.
Biological mother I no longer no contact with her because I was 15, 16 growing
Yeah.
up. Left school, couldn't wait to leave school, hated authority. Wasn't one teacher I liked.
I suppose your circumstances would again compound that hatred of authority, in that you were made by the authorities to go and see a lady who essentially was a stranger.
She was a stranger. I was very good at chess,
Yeah.
and I used to play the teachers, I used to play the headmaster.
Yeah.
And he came in the morning for
Yeah.
being a naughty lad, and I'd beat him in chess in the afternoon, which made me feel 10 feet tall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got attention through that because other kids would know that.
Yeah.
I was in the chess team in school. So anything that I'd done, you know, competitive wise, and was good, it made me feel
Yeah.
part of, you know,
Yeah.
competition. And left school, couldn't wait to leave, left on the Friday, started work on the Monday in a butcher's factory. There was 6 butchers that working there, 3 packers, which were women, and I had a dislike of women.
Right. Okay. I taking it that we've got something called transference here, what we call transference in psychology, and I think we spoke about this before, where transference in psychology is this mechanism by where the feelings we had and the feelings and thoughts we had for one person in our past are transferred onto somebody in our present. And we know this, that your hatred of women come from your mother primarily, this stranger who wanted you back, who would come into your life and caused a lot of devastation after primarily rejecting you, and therefore you've transferred a lot of thoughts, you've generalised them thoughts and feelings onto women, and this is the way our childhood influences actually impact and can be quite devastating in our later life. So
Well, as we will come to in later life, it did transfer, you're right. I was to transfer that hatred to my future wife.
yeah,
And certain males, her
Yeah.
father,
you're right. Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
Because I look at the way I never had a proper father and mother. That's no disrespect to my foster parents.
No.
I realise today, I've learned, that they done the best they did.
Yeah.
He was a sick man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have forgiven him when I dealt with him.
Maybe we could talk about that, Steve, because I think this is a pertinent point, is that we say in the book, step 8 in the philosophy, the Alcoholic to Alchemist philosophy, is forgive and be free.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, that's very difficult for people who've experienced what you've experienced in your life. You know, we can't turn around to people who've suffered abuse in whatever way and say, well, you must forgive the perpetrator, otherwise your life is going to be, you know, it's got to be devastation, it's going to be very unhappy, because that doesn't work. But the problem we've got is that if we know what hatred and resentment is like when we're carrying it around with us 24 hours a day, it consumes our energy, and it leaves, it depletes us and leaves, it doesn't leave a lot left to expend on the things we value in life. So it is important that we try and resolve these unresolved issues.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can just explain the process with your father that we went through, where what we done, there was hatred there, obviously, and you carrying that hatred really was, it was wrecking your own life.
Mhm.
And we needed to find a way, and there is a process that we found. And first of all, we won't elaborate, we've no need to go into depth over this, but we went from hatred, and then you expressed your hatred, and your hatred turned into anger. Now there's a big difference between hatred, because anger is the biggest transformation agent in this world. When people get angry, things change. They look for change when they're angry. So anger is a change agent, whereas hatred really does nothing but eat away and erode our insides, erodes us psychologically. So we spoke, and you spoke about your foster father, and in that process you alleviated a lot of the hatred, and that hatred turned to anger. And I think then what we done, anger then is, is the agent for change. We delved into the possibilities of what happened to him as a child, and we realised that there was things in his childhood which, for the purposes of this interview, we won't go into. But you began to understand why he was the way he was. So we'd moved from a process of hatred, pure hatred, to anger, and then we moved on to an understanding. Now when people, I've done this many a times with people in counselling settings, when people get to that understanding, quite often at that point they can let go to a certain degree. It frees them up. And in your case, you did actually go to your father's grave, didn't you? Would you like to tell us about that? Your foster father?
I went to my foster father's grave, and it was a long cemetery.
Right.
And then I found out where it was, and I went, and I said, I went to both graves actually. I went to my mother's grave,
Yeah.
which gave me a lot of peace.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't believe she was dead.
Yeah.
It took me a lot of years.
Yeah.
And I went and got souls, said what I had to say. So much that I believe that she's with me today.
Yeah.
And I believe also that he looks down on me today.
Yeah. So just explain that process when you did go to your foster father's grave, because I remember you saying to me you did feel a great sense of relief.
I did, because I asked him what.
Yeah.
And I spoke to him.
Yeah.
And no big flashlights, nothing happened, but it just had a sense of relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a sense of peace come over me.
Yeah. And what we must emphasise here is that this process of forgiveness is a gift to yourself. It's not about the perpetrator. It's your life that's being consumed. It's your life that's being eroded by carrying this hatred and this resentment, and rightly so. That hatred and the resentment is really a natural way of feeling, considering the experiences you went through. Nevertheless, it erodes and corrodes your life when you're carrying it round, that baggage. And for people out there who are experiencing similar things, the reason we have a step A that says forgive and be free is that forgiveness is a gift to yourself.
Yeah.
It's the start of your own freedom, which you cannot have when you're carrying that hatred and resentment around, because, like I say, it consumes your life. But when we've done these processes in counselling, which we've done on many occasions with people, once they get to that understanding, not everybody gets to forgiveness, which again is very understandable. But when they get to understanding, when they get to anger and then understanding, they do get a sense of release. And it's at that point they're able to move on with their life. So thanks for sharing that, Steve. It took a lot of courage to share that part of your life. And your childhood issues. And it's a great example because, you're 23 years sober today, and you're a great example to people out there who use the different excuses. You couldn't get much worse of an early life than you've experienced. And you drank, obviously, because drink helps you forget them things.
Mhm.
It helps you not care about them. And we're going to talk about your drinking in a second. But, you know, today you're 23 years sober. And that is an example to anybody out there, no matter what your childhood experiences are. They're not an excuse for drinking destructively.
Not at all.
And that might seem easy for us to say now, but we are two people who've been through various things. Your childhood is very different from mine, but nevertheless we've been through different things in life, and we've proved that, you know, no matter what the circumstances, you're able to turn them around. So let's, if we could move on a little bit to speak about your drink and how that. So we were talking before, you were saying you got these jars of cider, or bottles of cider from the greengrocers, and as soon as you drank that, it made you feel much better. And we've explained why that happened. So what happened? How did it escalate the drinking?
Well, as I was growing up, and I could get into pubs. It always looked at a very young age, and it's difficult getting in pubs and that, but I'd get in. And I'd sit there and have a drink. And in my early days, 16, 17, 18, I would end up in the dark, seedy places of part of Liverpool.
Right, okay.
The people know where I'd up Allen Street, and
Yeah.
they were all dingy dives, if you like, and I'd feel comfortable in them.
Yes.
It's like I was taking myself back to the railway.
Yes, yeah.
You know, a lot of my drinking was in later years was done on park benches, railways,
Yeah.
cemeteries.
Same with me.
The rain, the wind, the better.
Yeah,
I felt comfortable.
yeah.
I'd sit in my home. I'd had the kids and the wife, and I'd sit in the back garden, and it'd be raining, be horrendous weather, and I'd sit out with a bottle of whatever, and I felt all right.
Yeah.
You know, I had a loving family, a loving wife and kids, and I wouldn't go into them because I didn't feel right in the house.
No.
I felt right outside in all that with my friend,
Yes.
the bottle.
Yes. And I think friend is the right terminology. Just to, you know, make things clear to the viewers, you had 5 children, didn't you, as well? And you know, a wife who you did love very much. Yes, yeah. Maybe you couldn't see that at the time, but you know, today you realise that. But you were saying about drink being your best friend, and I think, you know, that we shouldn't underestimate the power of that terminology, because anything that appears to take all our problems away, which alcohol does, before what we call in the philosophy, before we cross the abreactive threshold, and that's the point at which drink no longer works. It no longer takes our problems away. In fact, it exacerbates our problems. And what we're saying there, when we cross that line, people refer to it as a line, don't they?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
When we cross that line, and alcohol no longer relieves, it no longer blocks out, or masks is probably the best word, masks our problems for a short period of time. It exacerbates them. And quite often at that point, we will go out in blackouts or in alcoholic amnesia, and we'll create a new history from which we want to escape. We do things that are out of character. Do you remember doing stuff like that?
Well, I was, early days with the drink, I always had to be in control.
Right, okay.
Always had to be in control. So, where other people around me would get drunk and misbehave and act soft and all that, I would think that was terrible. But I had to be in control.
Right.
And slowly, that control disappeared.
Right, okay.
And I became worse than they. But I didn't blame the drink.
Right.
I blamed everything around me.
Yeah. I think that's another pertinent point there, is that alcohol, we have the faculty of reasoning, and when we drink and alcohol affects our frontal lobes, our faculty of reasoning goes, so that we have no control. We're like wild horses at that point. We talk about the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. That's where quite a placid person, quite, a loving, reasonable person, can turn into a destructive monster, basically, because alcohol affects or it basically incapacitates our faculty of reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
We don't care. So we act uncharacteristically. And then when we sober, we can't cope with what we've done. We can't cope with them actions. And we've all had it before. We feel full of remorse, full of guilt. And what do we want to do? What's the first thing that enters our mind?
Drink.
We need to have a drink, because before we cross the abreactive threshold, drink would take all of that away for a very short period of time. But once we've drank and we've habituated drink so much, what happens is that, let's say before we cross the abreactive threshold, when we have problems, consuming alcohol is like throwing water on a fire. It puts the problems out for a short period of time, and I must emphasise that.
Yeah.
When we've crossed that line, and people out there will know what we're talking about here, and we drink, it's like putting fuel on a fire. It exacerbates all the problems. We go out of control, our head is just chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
We put drink on top of that, and we're like loose cannons. So back to your story.
So
Steve.
I'm in blackouts, and which brought on that guilt and remorse,
Yeah,
because I was the Jekyll and Hyde drinker.
yeah,
Blamed everybody.
yeah,
Never blamed me for my friend the drink. I set fire to my own home.
right,
Don't remember. Don't remember the fireman coming and the police and me creating murder with them.
right,
My wife then, we only had the 2 children. She'd gone to her parents. It was a Friday. And I do not remember. And I remember going into work that morning, the Saturday morning. And I came home from work. When I got into work, one of the guys said to me, "Have you seen the state of your clothes and your face?"
right,
And I was all, not burnt, but had all the effects of the smoke.
right, okay,
It was a chip pan fire.
right,
I cleaned myself up, borrowed some money, as I did,
yeah,
went straight to the pub, told everyone that somebody had set fire to my house. I'd become a liar.
right, okay,
Went home, and Chris and her friend were scrubbing the living room, kitchen and walls. And I walked in and I said, "I told you you'd set fire to this house one day, because he's smoking all the time."
right. Did you know at that point, Steve, or was it totally blackout? Did you believe what you were saying, or did you know?
I believed what I was saying.
Yeah, so
I believed what I was
so
saying.
you'd set fire to the house,
Yeah.
and you was convinced, and that's typical. I can identify with things like that.
Another time I nearly murdered me. My sister-in-law lived with us from when she was 15.
Yeah,
I went home. She wasn't 15 then, she was older, but I wasn't violent in that way towards women.
no,
And I beat her up.
yeah,
And again, I went to work on that Saturday morning. Friday was my drinking day,
yeah,
before it escalated into
Yeah.
every day. And I was in the betting shop by the local pub by me, and I came out of the betting shop, and she was outside with her boyfriend, and her face was in a terrible mess.
yeah.
And I looked at her and I went, "Who's done that to you? Let me know, we'll go and get him."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Steve, don't you remember?"
And that to me sounds so alien, although I can identify, because I flipped like that. With me, it was mainly with bouncers on clubs. It was people who were going to beat me to a pulp. I would pick on in drink, and I couldn't remember why. I was just very unpredictable. I would never get involved in violence unless I was threatened myself.
Mm-hmm.
But with drink, I've done things like buttered my closest friends for no real reason at all. And I know you to be a passive person. In fact, one of the jokes we often had throughout the years is that you've never won a fight in your life.
That's right.
I know you to be a very passive person. But these are lessons people out there can learn, that when we drink and our faculty of reasoning goes, there's nothing to marshal our behaviour. These are things that can happen, and I know the devastation you must have felt when you found out that it was you that actually inflicted that harm on this lady.
I did,
Yeah.
terrible.
So
But I went and got drunk
yes, which is the normal reaction.
and went home, and can remember saying to her, you deserved it,
Yeah.
you know. An old person that lives opposite me, she's still today, 90 years of age, Mrs. Powell, tried to throw a wheel through her window.
Yeah.
Got told about that.
Yeah.
You know, I would wake up in police cells and hospitals and not knowing why I was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'd have cuts, black eyes, and I'd be let go, and then as soon as I got out, I would go and drink.
Yeah. And did the drink, as it did with me, did it start to affect your cleanliness and your...
Do you know I would never ever change my socks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And as you know, I'm a bin man.
Yeah.
And I'd never change my clothes.
Yeah.
Never change my socks, underwear,
Yeah.
and thought not of it.
No.
At times I thought I was invisible.
Yeah.
You know.
And messing yourself and stuff like that.
From all my life, and it was put, my mother has said, he's got a weak bladder, I'd wet the bed.
Yeah.
And I wet the bed right throughout my childhood.
Yeah.
Every night.
Understandably.
Every night I wet the bed.
Yeah.
And every night I drank. Wherever I lay my head, I wet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was so embarrassed at first, and then I accepted it.
Yeah.
If you had a childhood like me,
Yes.
if you had these people around me,
Yeah.
I never blamed the drink.
Yeah.
One time I blamed the drink, drinking pints, so I went on short.
Yeah.
I'm
Which
still wetter.
we've addressed in, when we looked at the 6 stages of alcoholism, there's one stage that we call bargaining, and that's the stage where we say, okay, I'm in this mess because I drink spirits, I'm in this mess because I drink wine, so therefore I'll just drink beer. And then it's, I'll only drink this beer on Friday night. And we know through the experience of speaking to thousands of people all around the world that it just doesn't happen. So if people out there have this ploy, know without a shadow of a doubt, unless you're different from the thousands of people we've met over the years, it's not going to happen. Your drinking is not going to get better.
No.
We've never, and it said, we met in AA, which we're both very grateful to AA, and I want to emphasise again, this philosophy is to act in parallel with AA. It's to give an added dimension, really, to the AA program, because I, like yourself, owe my life to AA, and I want to make it very clear that this philosophy is also for AA members. We don't want to create that territorial boundary between two. We want to synthesise the two, bring people together. This philosophy is based on a lot of psychology, both personal psychology and transpersonal, because we look at spiritual aspects.
Yeah.
If people are not into the spiritual side, that doesn't matter whatsoever, because they can just keep it on a psychological level. It's very flexible. But I think it's really important, that we mention that we want to incorporate as many people as we can. But the lessons, going back to what we were speaking about there before, the lessons that you can learn from just the simple videos on the website, like the 6 stages of alcoholism, the bargaining stage, you'll recognise yourself. And know, like you and I, we couldn't be told, so we continued and continued until we were beaten to a pulp, beaten to the ground. And then we realised, and then we accepted, but you don't have to go that far.
No,
if you listen to experiences such as yours and myself and thousands of other people, you realise that actually the odds of that ever happening are probably nil. But,
well, I thought it was just a norm to drink the way I did.
Yeah.
To get in the States I did. And everybody else was something wrong with them.
Yes, yeah.
And I was one of these fellas that if I asked somebody to go for a drink and they only went for 1 or 2, something wrong with them.
Yeah.
Didn't want to know them.
Yeah.
And if you didn't drink, you weren't part of this world.
I think that's important as well, isn't it? We seek out like-minded people, so that, because if we don't, people are going to say that we're weird, that we're stupid, that we're, that we're evil or whatever terminology comes about because we act in the way we do. Therefore, we seek like-minded people, like people who drink like us, people who drink in them dark denizens of places as well, where we feel away from the world.
Yeah.
Did you come to a point, as I did, where you were saying you drank in isolation? The reason I started drinking in isolation is that I become so unpredictable in drink. Like you, I didn't know if I was going to strike out at somebody, embarrass myself in some way, and I knew that once I drank, I couldn't predict my behaviour. I knew that before I started drinking. Therefore, it was behind closed doors, behind closed curtains, in isolation. That way, I knew I couldn't embarrass myself.
That came later.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That came
as it did with me.
That came later.
Yeah.
In life. I cause you know that the drink and your performances after it, with it, during it, gives you a lot of guilt, you know.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of guilt. Just a story I had to. I had a friend, and he was a lovely man. He was in his late 20s, a bit older than me. All through my life, I always sought out older people.
Yes, yeah.
I knocked around with older people than myself. Felt secure with them.
Right.
And I knocked around with this lad, and other lads, and Roy, his name was Roy. He collapsed one night in the Broadway pub, and he was taken away, and got a long story short, he was diagnosed with pancreatitis.
You're right, yeah.
And he was in hospital for a while, and then he come out, and he come back to work. He worked with me in the depot in Green Lane. And he'd come out with us, and I see where he was coming from, because I had done the same when I put the drink down. He came out to be sociable.
Yes, yeah.
But he'd drink glasses of Coke, and I give him a terrible hard time. What's the matter with you? Get a drink down here. And we went into town one Friday afternoon. Went to the wine lodge, and I'm drinking Aussie Whites and he's drinking this Coke, and I called him for everything, and he started drinking Aussie Whites.
No.
On the Friday. On the Monday, he didn't turn in for work, and on the Thursday, he'd been found with a burst liver.
Right.
And I blame myself.
Dead?
He was dead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Never reached 30.
No.
And I'm thinking, if I hadn't forced him, or not forced him, but called him for everything, get a drink down there.
No.
And I was like the Jekyll and Hyde drinker, but we laugh and talk about I couldn't fight, and I couldn't fight. I thought I could fight.
Yes.
With drinking me, I was
Yes.
Muhammad Ali. But I was with this.
Yeah.
With the tongue, it could destroy you.
Mission.
And there was another lad, he was a friend of Chris's family, a friend of Chris's dad. He was only a young lad, and he'd been away to sea, and he'd come home off a trip. And it was his 18th birthday. He went away to see early merchants at 16.
Yeah.
Come home from sea, and he got run over on the. He was supposed to meet me that night,
Yeah.
and he got run over by the Eagle and Child, the pub in Liverpool,
Right.
on the crossing. Come out, staggered out of the story is he staggered out of the Eagle and Child, went to go across the crossing and got hit and run.
Yeah.
And I was broken hearted, because he was alright, he was a nice lad, John. Chris was broken hearted, my wife and the family, and then later down the weeks, something come up about my drinking, and he come into the equation. He come into the talk, and I believe I said that he should watch where he's effing going.
Right.
These were stuff that I could say
Yeah. Yeah.
in drink.
Yeah.
Really nasty and venomous, you know.
Yeah. And I think it's good to, talk about shadow projection at this point as well. And this is perhaps helpful for people, families of people who are living with alcoholism, basically, living with somebody who's got an alcohol problem. That shadow projection, we tend to be venomous with our tongues, especially to those who are very close to us, especially to our loved ones. And we can crucify them with some of the things we call them. And really all we're doing is expressing the chaos within us.
Yeah.
Really it's our self-hatred that's being expressed outwardly. It's all the things we don't like about ourselves that's coming out. And instead of owning them, we see them situated in the closest people to us, and we let them have it with our tongues. We really, we annihilate them, and we know this is a very, very common practice. And I'd like to say to the families out there, people who are watching, families is, as much as this is very, very difficult, you know, try as much as possible to depersonalise this, because it really isn't aimed at you people. And I've often said I can only ever think of one thing worse than going through alcoholism, because you feel like you're possessed by something that you have no power over whatsoever. We know today we certainly do have power over it.
Yeah.
We certainly can do something about it. But that's the way it feels, and we really believe that. But the people out there who have to sit and watch quite powerlessly because they can't do anything about a loved one drinking, they're the people I really feel for. And I think we must also add as well, when we do when we have in the past with drink downers annihilated people with our tongue, with, you know, verbally annihilated people, it's us who really suffer afterwards, you know, because we love these people, let's make no mistake about that, and we feel so much remorse and guilt after we've done that. But it must be awful, you know, and I really do feel for the families. And we've got my own mum on video on the website speaking about her side of things. We've got Wendy, a lovely and courageous lady who spoke about losing her brother through alcoholism. And if there's anybody out there who's got a story to tell, would like to come down and come on camera or do an audio recording for the website to help other people, please do get in touch with us. So let's go. I think we've talked quite a lot about the drinking, Steve, and we know, you know, it started with your childhood. If we just recap, you know, it started with your childhood, the difficult childhood you had. Then you obviously, the Alcoholic to Alchemist philosophy said the first step really is our inability to cope with the curriculum of life. So we seek escape from life itself, and obviously in your circumstances that's very obvious. And we all, you know, that's why we use alcohol. Alcohol, it gives the illusion that it's alleviated all our problems. It doesn't alleviate anything, in fact it exacerbates them in the long run, but that's why it's so seductive. So, you know, we go through there and there's the curriculum life, and it works for a while, and then we cross this line, which we call the abreactive threshold. What I say after that is that every time we drink, after crossing that line, we're going to have an abnormal reaction in one of a number of ways. It can be physical, where we'll be sick and we'll be what's gone. It could be mental, where we start doing things that are, you know, out of, and it's emotional. I don't advocate the spiritual element, the spiritual sickness element. Personally, I think the spirit is something that's apart from our psychological aspect. Therefore, it's beyond getting sick. So for me, I don't personally go down that route, but I acknowledge other people. Interestingly enough, the spiritual model came, alcoholism, the disease and illness model of alcoholism, come after Prohibition, when the alcohol companies wanted to de-demonize alcohol. So they paid big organisations to go out and find something called the disease of alcoholism, to remove the emphasis from alcohol and to up the sales of alcohol to the person. And then the alcohol treatment field couldn't get paid from the government or through insurance if alcohol wasn't registered as a proper disease, and that's how the disease model come about. There was never any scientific evidence for the disease or illness model of alcoholism. So that's, and what we say is that if that's true, and let's say that alcoholism is just a mechanism of escape, then we have the power back in our, if it's a disease or illness, we don't have the power, because that's something that impacts on us. And I feel this is very important. When we deem it as a mechanism of escape, because of what it does to our brain, then the power comes back with us. And I love the saying is that destiny is not down to fate, it's down to choice. I think that's so important. So we've crossed this line, and then we abreact. Every time we take a drink, we know we abreact. So there's nothing left in drink for us. There's never any happiness once we've crossed that line. So therefore, the only way really to escape our problems is to solve them, which is step 3 in this program. You know, primarily the things we're escaping from are fear, futility, psychological pain. You're a great example of that, and fear, futility, psychological pain, and guilt. You know, they're the 4 umbrella categories. Under that, you know, like psychological pain, things like that, low self-esteem may come under that. There's lots of subcategories. So let's leave the drinking aspect now, Steve, because I think we've realised that you know your drinking led you into prison cells. It led you into the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde syndrome. It took you from a passive person to an aggressive person at times, and then you felt, like many of us do, terrible remorse for the actions you'd carried out during alcoholic amnesia. So when did you come to a point where you said enough's enough? What clicked? What changed?
I was, I'd be drinking, and all of a sudden something would come into my head, and my heart, and my soul. This is not you. This stuff you're putting into yourself, it's not you.
Yeah.
You know, like I used to feel as a kid, not part of.
Yeah.
The drink wasn't part of me anymore.
Yeah.
And going back to the drink again, I drank copious amounts of drink.
Yeah.
To try and recapture that.
Yes, yeah.
I had a very big capacity of drink.
Yeah.
And that's not being big.
No.
You know, it's saying as it is.
Yeah.
People who know me, you know. It stopped working. It made me, I went into myself.
Yeah.
I wasn't any longer wanted in society, really.
Right, yeah. There's a real important point here, because I totally identify what you say, and even though your life, like mine, it revolved around drink for years and years and years, that was the way of life. There was that something in you. I remember being in a prison cell, and I was dehydrating, and I know I was about to fit, and they wouldn't give me any water. And I remember at that point looking down the toilet pan saying, I'm going to drink that water. And I remember saying to myself, I wasn't born this way. I remember being on a rat-infested railway embankment, and it was pouring down with rain.
Yeah.
And I was watching the rats around me, it was dark. Something in me, and this something in me is what I really refer to as the alchemist. Sometimes I call it the indwelling divinity, because that comes from my spiritual path. Nowadays, I'd probably sooner call it the alchemist, but it's that light inside us, it's that unblemished part of us. We don't have to be spiritually or religious minded to know that there's a light, there's an unconditioned, unblemished part of us there that if we can tap into, and this is step 4 in this philosophy, allow life to unfold from the level of our indwelling divinity. In other words, there's an aspect of our psyche, if you want to put it in psychological terms, that knows the right answer to every conceivable problem. Other people call that spirit, soul, guardian angel. We can call it what we want. If you're not religious, spiritually minded, call it what you want. Call it your higher self, your unconditioned self, your wise self. I love the wise witness within. That's another saying I love. But once we start tapping into that part of our psyche and letting that lead us in life, we're not going to go wrong. So back to what you were saying, Steve, you said that you recognised, you know, you weren't cut out, you weren't born this way. So what happened? What actions did you take?
What actions I took was, I was a person that was never off work.
Yeah?
With drink, or without it. I passed my PTI at 38 years of age.
Which was physical training
instructor.
Yeah,
passed that. In the throes of drink.
Yeah.
In the throes of drink.
Yeah.
And I sacked work.
Yeah.
I sacked work. We'd been took over by a new company from the council, and I felt my marriage was going.
Yeah. So everything was going at this point, really.
My eldest son had left.
Yeah.
Stephen had left. Teddy was leaving on his 18th birthday, a party that they had for him that I wasn't invited,
Yeah.
which made me feel so.
So we say that we alcohol, if we're experiencing alcoholism, we continue to drink, it's going to strip everything away, and let's make no mistakes about that. We always say it won't happen to us, you know, we maintain that that sort of mindset, that cocky mindset, it's not going to happen to us. And as it did with you, it took your family away, it took your job away, mainly it took your dignity away, it stripped you of everything. And let's not make any more mistakes about it. In the last week, I know of 2 people who have harmed themselves because of alcoholism, and that's what lies ahead. So, again, Steve.
So, I took time off work, I'd sacked work in my head. I'd stayed off, and I'd gone back to, I used to call my first home, which is the Farmer's Arms.
Yeah.
In Townsend, and I went in as soon as it opened. I got 3 drinks. I stood by the bar, felt the loneliest person in the world,
Right.
as I did on many occasions, even when the drink was working.
Yeah.
And that was from the Monday. I'd go home, go back again, go home, go back again. And there was a lady at the bar, Kathy, who'd been in Alcoholics Anonymous,
Yeah.
but never made it, was still drinking. And she said to me on the Thursday, Steve, she said, you'll never ever come in here again. And I thought I was going to get knocked over,
Yeah.
run over,
Yeah.
because I was always told, how do you get across the drive? I had 2 drives to cross,
Yeah.
Queen's Drive, both sides. And I used to always got home,
Yeah.
by hook or by crook.
Funny you mention that. I remember one time trying to cross a dual carriageway like that, and I was that drunk I fell over. I had all white clothes on, and I fell over and I couldn't stand up. And I was covered in mud. I was thrashing about trying to get myself back on my 2 feet. And all I could do was look at the stars above. I couldn't literally get up. In the end, I think somebody come past after about an hour of me being there and helped me to my feet. But that's the state I got in.
Yeah, I miss her.
So go on, sorry for...
So she told me this, and I went home, opened the door. Chris was in bed.
And this is your wife,
The
obviously.
wife with the girls, they were in bed. Once they heard me come up the path, they didn't know what stage was going to come in. They'd scarp it.
Yeah.
And I sat down in my chair. I had drink there. I poured the scotch out. Looked at it. Got up and poured it down the sink. Came back into the room and I looked up at the sky. Now I wasn't a very... I went to a Methodist church as a child.
Yeah.
When I look back, some of the happiest days of my life.
Yeah.
But I if you like, sacked God when my mother died.
Yeah.
And the drink became my God. And I looked up at the ceiling and I said, please God, help me.
No. Yeah.
And for the first time in a long time I fell asleep.
Yeah.
Because I didn't sleep well in drink.
Yeah.
I'd black out, become unconscious, but I never slept
Yeah.
as a normal sleep. And I fell asleep and I woke up in the morning and the lights, the girls had gone to school, Chris had gone out, because they were all avoiding me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got up, I was still in my clothes, I'd been in the same clothes all week, when I think about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I walked towards Green Lane, and our depot was in Green Lane. So I'd walked that and walked many, many times, because I'd worked there 24 years. And when I got to the church on the corner of St. John's, there was a guy there, a mate of mine, Paul, who was the caretaker. And I walked over and he said, Steve, what's the matter? I said, Paul, this drink's done me. So he said, well, come into the church. So I went into the church, went up to his room, he had a room in the church. And he gave me this, what I know now is a 12-step pack,
Yeah.
Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, read that. and I read it. It was 20 questions. I answered them all and could have put more to them.
Yeah.
He said, "Do you want to go to a meeting?" I said, "Yeah." Went to my first meeting in the Catholic Cathedral, the crypt. Walked in, didn't know what to expect. I was sat down and I listened to a guy talk. Ernie.
Yeah.
And I got identification, and I got hope, and I got the feeling I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
Because all my life I felt that nobody else ever felt the way I did.
Yeah.
And it blew me away.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the biggest gifts Alcoholics Anonymous gives.
For me it was.
That process of, that feeling of identification, that feeling of I'm not alone, I'm not mad, there's lots of other people like me.
Yeah.
And believe me, there is millions of people. Alcoholism in the world now is at pandemic levels.
Yeah.
And so then you come into alcoholism.
So I come into Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to my second meeting. I met yourself. We become bosom buddies, brothers that I never had. And
Yeah.
I must say that I do have a brother out there.
Yeah.
And a father if he's still alive,
Yeah.
but I've never met.
Yeah.
And for now I've left alone.
Yeah.
We become brothers. I attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings with yourself and many meetings, many retreats.
Yeah.
And although I wasn't drinking and I wasn't, the anger wasn't visibly there and the resentment, I learnt all different words,
Yeah.
When I picked the Alcoholics Anonymous book up, I read the book, but I didn't identify with all these big words, self-centeredness and
Yes.
resentments and
Yeah.
I just put it down. I identified with the drinking stories and that,
Yeah.
and they helped me,
Yeah.
because I wasn't alone. And I was to go 5 years into Alcoholics Anonymous without drinking, but inside I wasn't changing.
No. And I think just to pick up on that point, because it's important to people who are just, starting this journey, is that alcoholism doesn't go when we put a drink down.
No.
Drink is just the symptom. It's just something we use to mask the real problems. And therefore, if we put drink down and we don't start to resolve our issues, we don't start on a self-development program, we're probably going to feel worse than we did, or equally as bad as we did when we were drinking. And therefore, inevitably, like the vast majority of people will return to drink.
Yeah.
It's very important that we start on a self-development program, isn't it, Steve? Be it the AA program or, the Alcoholic to Alchemist program is meant to go in at an even deeper level, given, it's to work in accordance with the AA program, but it goes in at a much deeper level and gives people the tools to come to know themselves and give insight and work very much as a self-administered counsellor, if you like,
My saving grace was that I never ever, I can remember the last days of my drinking and the feelings I had.
Yeah.
And I never ever want to go back.
Yes, okay.
And that was my saving grace at that time.
In the book we talk about away from motivation, getting in touch with all of those things you will leave behind when you give up drinking. That's a prime example of what we're talking about. Them feelings, I never want to go back to that. In other words, I want to move away from that. And we really encourage people, once they come away from drinking, to get in touch with that side. But I must mention, one of the biggest failures I've seen with people in my time, they know that, they can do that, they know what they want to move away from because it's hit them in the face, but not many of them know what they want to move towards. And we need to have a path in life. And the Alcoholic to Alchemist philosophy encourages people through exercises to get in touch with what they value in life and to construct a new life around that. And for me, that's a linchpin. That's so important to get in touch with where you want to go in life, because it's no good knowing what you want to move away from. That's very important, because that will help you propel you, it'll give you the initial push away from drink that way. But if you don't know where you want to go in life, you're going to become lost and you're going to become frustrated, downhearted, and we know where that eventually leads.
Yeah.
So at that point, you know, you knew you wanted to move away from drink, and
I wanted to move away from the way I felt.
yes,
And I couldn't work out. I've put this poison down, and why am I feeling? I don't know what I want. I wanted to feel peaceful and content.
yeah,
And I was doing stuff with yourself,
yeah,
and we were going on holidays together. We were going, you know, we'd come up here together when you had the caravan and everything. Now that's all nice. It's all nice. It's all material stuff.
yes,
And all the material stuff is nice.
yeah,
No, I could afford. I could buy. You know, you told me how to buy clothes, and
no,
because I wasn't into any of that, mate.
yeah, yeah,
But there was something lacking in me inner self.
mhm,
And although we'd sat down and talked, I'd never ever. I'd suppressed everything all my life.
yeah, mhm,
You know, I was married to Chris, as you know, for a long, long time, and she knew nothing about me.
yeah, yeah,
And as I am, I knew nothing about her. And nobody else did. Because I was brought up in the era where you don't tell anybody anything. Big
Yes.
boys don't cry.
yeah,
You don't say nothing outside this door. And my mother used to say to me, Stephen, you always think people are out to get you.
yeah. And this is referred to in psychology as social construction. We're basically entities who are constructed by our social circumstances.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a big argument, you know, with the genetic side of it, obviously, as well. But I think, you know, there's so much evidence to support social construction. We become what we've learned in our experiences. The way we handle our experiences, like, actually constructs us as a person, you know.
You see, what I like about one of the things I like about the program, the Alcoholics Anonymous, is that it's suggested.
Yes, yeah,
Because I'm the type of alcoholic and person that if you tell me
yes.
you'll do that or you won't do that, I'll say up you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think that's also with the Alcoholic to Alchemist philosophy, is that, you know, there's lots of things that we suggest in there, but there's so many different routes and paths. It leaves a lot of malleability to the person themselves. They don't have to get down on their hands and knees. They don't have to believe in a God. You know, they can still gain the insight they need. I'm not a religious person today, Steve. I know that. I have spiritual beliefs,
Yeah.
which really help me. But we must also remember that a belief is not socially true. It's not something that's global. A belief simply is an idea that we hold to be true. Your beliefs could be totally different, and some of them are from mine, because your idea on a certain topic is different, and that's fine. That gives a lot of diversity in the world. It'd be a very miserable world, dull world, if we all had the same belief systems. But beliefs either support us or hinder us. And if we've got a lot of beliefs that hinder us, when we become awake, when we stop living life robotically or unconsciously, then we can exercise our faculty of choice. And we can say, actually, I've said I believe this all my life, but I've never questioned it. I've never said, why do I believe it? I've just accepted it. And if I look at it again, it doesn't serve me in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I'm going to let go of that belief, and I'm going to replace it with this one. And that, there's something called the ABC technique in cognitive behavioural therapy, which we might have an activating event, which might be we have a big argument with our partner. And then the belief that comes right after that, if I have a drink, this will all go away. And then the consequence, so we've got activating event is A, B is belief, and C is the consequence. Now the consequences of that often is blackouts and a history of, you know, another history of things that we can't cope with, you know, uncharacteristic behaviour. And we use this exercise in the philosophy, you know, on pages we have them set out, and to when we start living life consciously in opposed to unconsciously, which we did when we were drinking, then we can actually gain insight to what triggers us, which is the activating event. We can see our beliefs that really don't support us, the life-denying beliefs, not life-enhancing. We can say what we'd like to change that to, and see what the consequences of that become. So it's very specific in that way, the Alcoholic to Alchemist philosophy. The other thing is, it's there 24 hours. a day, 7 days a week for people, because it's online. There's interviews like we're doing now. People, imagine, you know, when you were going through your bad time, if a facility like this was available where you could go home, if you were into computers, you could switch on a computer. I know our era didn't really into them. Could switch on a computer and hear all these stories, and then be given all the techniques, you know, to psychological techniques to be able to get the best out of life. It would be like a gift, wouldn't it?
Oh, it would be, yeah, amazing.
And it's anonymous because nobody knows you're there.
Yeah.
I think, Steve, we're coming to the end of the interview now, and we know what happened basically from the point you said about your drinking, about, you know, you weren't born this way, you'd have to be more to life than this. And we know actually, because a lot of the techniques that we've written, your stories at the front of the book, as mine is the book Alcoholics and Alchemist, and a lot of the techniques that we utilise, both of us together, the things we spoke about over the years, I documented and now have been put into this programme of Alcoholic to Alchemist, which again I emphasise is to run, you know, besides the AA programme, you know, they're not in opposition to each other. One, the Alcoholic to Alchemist one, will certainly enhance the AA one. So, you know, the way to work in conjunction with each other. So we know now that you went on to Alcoholics Anonymous, obviously, initially, as I did myself, and then we enhanced them things by the talk and we done and all the techniques we put over the years, and that's been documented for people on the website now. If people go specifically to the advanced course and use the workbook, they can work themselves through that. It is very important to have support as well, and on the website we've got forums where people can speak to other people. You know, you can register and speak to other people any time in the day. So let's just look, let's, you know, recap, Steve, you know, and in not really recap, let's see where you are today. And I know, like myself, you've had a great life, you've led a productive life, you've been in the same job for many years, you've held that job down, you've travelled the world as I've done, your relationships have become rich, you know, your family are all back in your life, you've got many grandchildren today, and some of your children, you know, have gone from saying they hated you at times to, you know, loving you today. And do you just like to, for us to end the interview, how that feels today?
Oh, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
You can't buy it, you can't put a price on it. You know, I'd like to get on in feelings.
Yeah. And do you ever wonder, do you ever think, I think today, if I'd have known I could have these feelings without drink, I'd have never gone there in the first place. Some of the feelings I get today, that, you know, you fantastic feelings. It might be worth mentioning that all feelings stem from thoughts. You know, we have thoughts, and the hypothalamus in our brain mixes chemicals that are mixed in accordance to how we're thinking. Them chemicals are dispersed through our body to create feeling. So therefore, the catalyst of how we feel is how we think. So if we stop thinking negatively and we start thinking positively, which takes work initially, but it becomes very easy after a while. You know, I was very negative in some ways when I was in the throes of alcoholism. I hated everybody. I thought there was no life for me. Today, I can't be around people who are negative for too long. You know, I think life's too short. And you know what? To conclude, then, what would you like to say to the people out there? You know, with how you feel today. You know, let's leave the drink behind. You know how life is today. What would you like to say?
Well, to everyone out there, life for me is good.
Yeah.
It is beyond the wildest dreams.
Yeah.
And I'd say to people who are struggling to pick up the website, to get identification,
Yeah.
to get hope.
Yeah.
And there is a life after drink.
Yes. Yeah. That's great.
And I'd like to wish everyone well.
That's excellent. And on that note, Steve, I'd like to thank you both on behalf of people watching for your courage. It's not easy to come and to bare your soul like you've just done. And you've been extremely honest, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of people will be able to relate. Yeah, I'd like to thank you for that. I'd like to thank you for your friendship, and I'd like to also say, unlike myself, who slip and slided and relapsed on many occasions over, you know, quite a number of years. You from day one when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous, I've never had a drink since that day. You know, and so we've both got different stories in that way. I had long periods of sobriety and relapsed, and what I'd like to say is it never changed anything. Be it me relapse after 1 month, or be it me relapse after 6 years, it never changed anything. I'm a long way away from a drink now, and to be quite honest with you, the drink problem seems like it was another life. It seems alien to me. I even find it very difficult to get in touch with that. And I don't particularly want to go there. Don't reminisce, or don't go back there. There's no need to.
No.
We both have fabulous lives today. We both have a lot of love and support with our families. And we've both got goals in life which we want to achieve, you know. And we know today really what we are is that we're unlimited potential.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the message, you know, I'd like to give. And on that note, Steve, I'd like to say thanks very much for coming along. We hope to see you around at some of our seminars and whatever, to speak to people there on the one-to-one. I'm sure there'll be quite a lot of people that'd like to speak to you. Best wishes, and thank you once again.